All right, so this week basically we're going to talk about color theory and a little bit about stationary design. Just like when we were talking about type and font, typefaces, font families, whatever you want to call them, color theory is one of the major factors in graphic design, right, and page layout. And so for web pages, for graphic design, for anything like that, color is one of the major tent poles. You know, it's one of the things that we really can control. And just like type, you want to use a limited number. You want to use ones that work together. So like type, usually you want, between 2 and 3 fonts. With colors, you want somewhere between 2 and 3 colors. You also want colors that work together, just like you want fonts that work together. Okay. But probably the biggest thing that you kind of will gather from it is just that when we were talking about typefaces, we were saying that when you, depending on the typeface, it could have, you might be saying something, explicitly, but it creates an implicit feeling. Colors do the same thing, where some colors will emote certain feelings in the viewer of them. Okay, so generally speaking, when we talk about colors, we can have like warm colors and cool colors, and they are exactly what the name suggests. Warm colors are colors that feel warm, like they have a warmth to them. The temperature is warm. Okay, cool colors will make you feel more cold. Generally, warm colors, in a real broad sense, go from yellow to like red in that range. Okay, like fire basically. And cool colors are typically in the blue range. Okay. That being said, you can have a warm blue and you can have a cool yellow. Like that's totally possible. And if you've ever done any painting, they'll buy like cadmium red, or you'll buy like royal red. There's actually different. Even the blacks, they'll have what is it? It's royal black, and then they'll have Renaissance black. If you're doing like printmaking, the Renaissance black actually has kind of a brownish tint to it, while the royal actually has kind of a bluish tint to it. So even those, even black, can have kind of a warm and cool kind of sense to it. Anyhow, but the different colors can have different meanings, right? So if we do like yellow, yellow typically makes people think of like the sun, makes them think happy. A lot of times when you have like recent past memories, like childhood, right? If you watch like film and stuff, it'll have like a yellow kind of tint over the whole thing. Orange can be kind of an interesting color because it still has warmth, but sometimes there can be associated with like warnings and construction and things like that. Red is the most passionate color. It's the one that sticks out the most. It makes you think blood, makes you think violence. Super lot of energy associated with red. Okay. Green is a really interesting color because green it has like some extreme differences, right? So green can mean like nature. Green can mean ill. Green can mean money. There's a whole area in green. Green can be very interesting. And blue, basically blue is the most stable of colors. It's really super cool. It makes you think of the sky or the water. It's very, they call it like the wisdom color. One of the reasons why you saw that royalty was always purple, and I know you're going to be like, it's because ink was really expensive to be purple. That is true. But also purple has both the values of red and blue. So you have someone who's got this strength, the stability of blue, but also the passion and the fire of red built into purple. And that's one of the reasons why that was often used for royalty. It gives that kind of feeling, okay? And depending on what the type of thing you're trying to do, like let's say I was going to do a bank, right? I want to do this bank, like, advertisement. I would probably do something more in the cool spectrum. I want something that people trust, right? That seems secure. That gives that type of feeling. I wouldn't do something like this. Now, if I was going to do something and it's like an advertisement for like a rock band concert, I'd probably do something, in here, really fiery red, and, it gets people really energized and excited. It kind of depends on what you're going for, When you think of a red car, right, it makes you think, so if I was going to do a car commercial, I'd probably choose red because it would just stand out and make you think, oh man, that thing goes. So it just, it's a matter of what your target audience is, okay? So some other ways that we kind of can describe things is pure hue. Pure hue means that there's nothing else added to it. It's just the absolute saturated color of whatever the color is. So whether it be red, green, blue, whatever. It's a pure, with nothing mixed in. Tints means adding white to the color. So a tint of red is pink, right? So pink, which is funny to me because there's no like tint of blue. You know, I mean, we have cyan, I guess, but that's not really a tint of blue. For whatever reason, pink is a special one. But basically you add white to it. Shades goes in the opposite spectrum. You add black to it, and those are shades. So tints and shades are basically the value change of a color. And then tones is more or less a saturation. So the more towards gray you go, you're lowering the tone of it. Okay, so that's the tones. These are kind of ways that we can kind of describe color. The most important thing when you do color, above anything else, I mean, even if you don't choose a great color, is that you need to have a color scheme. It just means that you need to follow some sort of order with how your colors are associated. So here are some ones here. These are kind of the most common ones. So achromatic just means without color, so black and white. When you do come up with a design, it's very important that your design doesn't need color because you don't know how it's going to be reproduced. Monochromatic means it's variation of one color. So you use one color and then you basically add whites and blacks to it. And that's monochromatic, but it's a single color. Analogous is colors that are in the same area on a color wheel. So meaning like from red to orange, right? All the colors in there, or from yellow to green, things like that. Okay, that's analogous, where it's colors that are near each other, but some spread, some hue change, but not too crazy. Complementary are opposite colors on the color wheel, right? So blue and green, right? They're opposites, so they tend to really, really pop. It's if you're trying to make something just really stand out, especially for advertisements, and it's like a one-off, and it's like, check this out, you want your car to pop. Complementary colors. Where you really see them a lot are like baseball or football or basketball teams, because they want their players to stick out. Whenever anything is supposed to just jump out at you, typically that's going to be complementary. There's also split complementary, which is kind of the same idea, but instead of just these two colors, you end up doing two, like they'd be like two blues and like two oranges. Warm and cool, basically you use colors that are in the warm spectrum versus colors in the cool spectrum. Just naturally, those should work. The idea here is that if you follow certain rules, like if you make colors a certain way, you'll know that they won't clash and be displeasing to look at or hard to see. Okay, so here's some color tips. Tones, avoid similar tones, the overall deepness of the color. The more saturated the colors are on top of each other, kind of like this, the harder it will be to see. So you can see these are like they're too similar, so it makes them really hard. These are way too saturated, so it makes my eyes bleed, right? Like that's just way too much of a bright red. That yellow is actually not that bright, but this green's super bright, right? That green against that red is just terrible. Use warm or cool colors to ascend things. So if I want to make this stand out, if you use warm colors will ascend, meaning they'll come forward. Cool colors will recede or descend. So typically like a blue or a purple or something like one of those kind of colors, cool color will go back. And if you have something kind of bright like a red or an orange or yellow, that will come forward. Another thing that's a neat little thing that you can do, I'm a big fan of this one, is an accent color. So the idea here is you have like one color that just is like a little pop of color. Something that's like you can add, a really good example is like interior design. So one of the things that you'll see, I'm not an interior design person, and if you ever saw my house, you would know that. But when you're making a living space, let's say this is just for a normal person, most of the time people like natural tones. So things like, your tans and your browns, or like fruit, like, like if it was gonna be like a pear green, or, not red apple, but, like those kind of like warm, comfortable, neutral tones. But the problem is they're not very interesting. So a lot of times what people will do is that they might have like a tan room, but then they'll have like a bright turquoise chair, right? And it's just this one chair that sticks out. Everything else is in that normal neutral thing, and it makes that one chair stand out. And it's just like a little accent. It's like a cherry on a sundae, right? It's just one little oomph, like, and it gives an interesting look to it. And the nice thing is too, when you do an accent, especially for interior design, I could paint my room in all these natural tones and then have like a bright red lamp. And then later on, if I don't like that lamp, I can easily replace it. If you're changing the colors or the carpet or ceiling or what have you, light fixtures and stuff, the more chic you go with something, the more it goes out of style quicker. And then if you want to change it, you'd have to do some serious things, like, you know, I'd have to rip up carpet, you know, or like change life. Like, it's going to be a big thing. But if I instead just have like accent pieces, I can just remove those and put a different accent piece in, and then it's like it's new. So anyways, accent in the design also works pretty well. Analogous, that's probably most of the time like one of the best ones to go for, but you can actually get seasonal stuff. So obviously like this makes you think like spring, right? This will make you think more summer. This makes you think more fall, and this will make you think more winter. Avoid cliches. So obviously if I have red, green, and white, it makes me think Christmas. What you can do is change some of the tints or shades of it, and now it looks more like looks minty. But it doesn't make me think Christmas, unless that's what you're going for. You want to limit the number of colors. So I said that before, you know, 2 to 3 colors, but there's a lot of reasons for that. One, both for just the design itself, it'll make it more appealing, but also if you've ever worked in a graphic design business, when you go and you have a shirt done, if you've ever had shirts made, they don't charge you, they charge you per color. And the reason why, they won't just tell you like, oh, I want to design on the front and, you know, it's 6 colors, I want to design on the back. Like, they will charge you for every color beyond one. There's a you know, there's more money you have to pay for that. Okay. And the same thing even with print to some extent. So if you limit the colors, it'll make it easier to reproduce and cheaper to make. Because again, like let's say you're doing even embroidery, you know, every time that they have to switch colors with the threads, the machine has to stop. And it does. I mean, we had a machine and it was 1,500 stitches a minute. And so it's blazing fast. So it's doing these stitches. Every time we have to do a color change, it has to stop, cut the thread, put in the thread in a new one, and then start a knot, and then start stitching that one, then stop. And so like it makes it take longer. It's more likely to have issues and things as well. When you're doing silk screening, so like t-shirts, they have to make a screen for every single color, and then they have to line up every single color when they go to print it, and then they have to cure it, which means like put it in the heat so that it dries out more or less, so it's not, you know, ink still. They do that in between every single time that they do a new color. So it's not just like more work to do a new color for each print. It's actually like twice as much, then 3 times as much. It's a lot more work, and so that's why they charge you more. It's also important too because let's say that you're doing an ad that's going to be on a flyer or something. It might need to be black and white, and if your stuff is so dependent on colors and stuff, it might not be able to reproduce that color well. So you really want to try, your design shouldn't need color. It should utilize color but not need it. One of the things that I'm a big fan of doing, because color is, it's one of those things I feel like some people are a little more sensitive to than other things. There's some things I'm really sensitive to. I'm really sensitive at motion and to some extent shapes. I understand those things pretty well. But color is just one of those things where it doesn't work for me as well. Some people my brother's a painter, and he looks at colors and I don't know, he's got like a weird thing with it. But he really understands it. He's got a really deep, you know, philosophical knowledge of it. But to me, I appreciate it, but I have a hard time choosing colors. One of the things that you can do is this. You can use an image. So it could be anything from like where you steal. So like let's say you see a dress and you like the reds and the greens and the colors that are in it. Take a picture of it and then sample those colors and use that as your design. Or if it's for a company, they probably already have their colors from their logo or what have you. Again, sample those colors and use that for your design. You know, steal what you see out there. But another thing you can do is actually just take a general picture. Like here, you can see there's the skyline. I wanted to make this design here. Well, all these colors, all this stuff that's penetrating, it's all being, you know, absorbed by the camera, but they're all bouncing off of each other, and they naturally create this harmonious image. So they're naturally going to blend in with each other because they're all contaminating each other. So the colors match. And by sampling those, I was able to get my yellow, this dark reddish brown, and then this actually is from the darkest colors here. This is like a really deep brown. But you can see it naturally works as a scheme. Another thing that's really useful is that if let's say you're making a composition and it's one big picture, if you use that picture on the graphic elements of your whatever you're making, by making them the same colors, they'll naturally match. See, this logo matches this image really well, right? The two matches. You can see this one does not, right? It almost does because this red's actually pretty close, but that's the only thing that's kind of tying it in. But by sampling the colors from the image, it naturally makes it work. Yeah, you could watch this video if you want. It's interesting, but you don't have to. Okay, so stationary design. So that's stuff on color. I would definitely, if you are going to get into graphic design and stuff, you should really research color, just like I was suggesting researching typography. Those are like just two major, big, important subject matter. And you could do a whole class just on color. I would suggest taking like a 2D design course. Sometimes there's like a second 2D design, which is more color based. Another really good one to do is painting, because painting is all about color. I'm a bad painter though, but so maybe find somebody who's good at it. I could draw okay. All right, so stationary design. So some rules for stationary design: you want to use as much repetition as possible. Helps keep the design in general together. So when we say stationary, what I mean by that are like business cards, letterheads, envelopes, things like that. Things that go on paper that a company would distribute. So anyways, repetition, you want consistency, so like use the same fonts. The font size should be pretty small. Typically, if it's a business card, it's 7 to 10 point, which I know seems really small because usually you're like 12 points, like the minimum. But if you go that large, it's actually going to be too large and it's not going to look very good. Don't use Times Helvetica or Arial. Actually, I like Arial and Helvetica, but anyway, that's what they say. Just because they're somewhat also Comic Sans. Don't use Comic Sans. They're just like ones that have a bad rap. Don't center your text. Make sure you use strong right or left alignment. When you write your stuff too, you don't need to write phone, fax, email, website, right? So if you look at here, if I write a series of numbers, like if I write jcone@cecil.edu, you don't need to know that that's my email address. You can kind of figure it out. You're not going to type that into your phone and go, why is it not calling him, right? Or if I do www.cecil.edu, again, you know that that's a web address. If I see 555.555.5555, I know that that's a phone number, right? So you don't need to write what they are. If they're properly formatted, they're going to be able to tell what it is. So it's just a waste to put it in there. Don't use dashes. Periods, bullets, and blank spaces are better than using the dashes. The dashes are just harder to read. Also, don't use any hyphens or commas. They just kind of muddy up and add clutter to what you're working with. A nice thing you can do, did I do it in any, right here. Let me see, Control ++++. These little vertical lines are really nice to use. They're the ones that are underneath backspace. You'll see like usually it's a backslash. You can do I forget what's called, a straight rule or something like that. These are good to break up sections. So business cards, they're 3.5 by 2 inches typically, or they can be 2 inches by 3.5. Don't be afraid to make, so if you look at this business card, right, you can see I just did a bunch of variations all on the same one. But if you look at this business card, you can see this is actually a vertical one. So when you make business cards, don't just stick to absolutely making it horizontal. It's not needed at all. Okay. Yeah, don't use 12 point, use 7 to 10 point font. Leave space, because you got to remember, when they are holding this, their thumb, assuming they have thumbs, are going to be on a spot anyway. So they would just be covering up. It doesn't have to go in every single corner. In fact, you don't want it to. Okay. But make sure you are using alignment. So right here, you'd be like, oh, well, this is center line. It's not, though. If you look, these elements here on this side, they are left aligned, and then these elements are right aligned, and I create this vertical line coming down. So it's kind of almost like center alignment, but not. But right here we have left alignment. You can see right here I try to use the image itself. Right here is kind of right alignment. But you can see, I did a bunch of different variations, right? So like cone production. When you do these designs, you should try and come up with as many variations as possible, all right? Letterhead and envelope. So if you're doing a letterhead, number 10 envelope is this size. You want to create a single focal point. Again, avoid center alignment. And think about reproduction. It might need to be faxed or copied or what have you. So you want things to be big and bold. So for instance, this isn't a be-all end-all, but you notice I put this little like ghosted cone here, which I think looks nice. I like the way it breaks up the space, but this I know would not reproduce. In fact, actually, I was in class and I was showing this lecture, and you couldn't see the cone because the projector wasn't. I didn't have enough sensitivity to actually even see it. So you got to think about that when you're making this stuff. So here you can see, like, this is a letterhead. I put it up in the top left here, and it leaves plenty of room to put all the other business. Same thing here, right? You get the idea. So start thinking about what you want to do for your final project. It can be whatever you want. But it's you can ask me if you have a weird idea. Basically, it's the same thing as the final project for DI1. It's just continue on what we're doing. You don't have to do it. This will be the second class that we do in InDesign. After this, we're going to go back to Photoshop. So it doesn't have to be an InDesign. Most people don't use InDesign for the final projects. I don't think that that's the case. But if you wanted to, you can. So the next assignment that I want you to do is an interactive portfolio. So basically using InDesign. First, what you're going to do is I want you to make a logo. Okay, so right here I have a video on me making the cone logo that you saw up in here, right? So I think that's this one I'm making. So I make that logo, and then this tutorial I go over how to make the interactive PDF. So the first thing I want to do is make the logo itself, okay, using InDesign. Which again is not the best. Usually you'd want to make that in Illustrator, but InDesign does have okay vector drawing tools, where Photoshop's vector drawing tools are not that great. InDesign's are a little bit better. And then once you made the logo, you're going to make an interactive PDF using this. Okay, so basically I want you to do an interactive PDF with your own custom logo. And at the end, instead of having a portfolio that's like that's in a book, you know, that physical portfolio, you're actually going to just make a digital portfolio. So when we're done, you'll hang on to this and you will take all of that and put it, you'll put all your pictures inside the digital portfolio, and then you can export out a PDF. Yeah, so that should be it. So basically just follow these 2 videos and hopefully that will get you through. Don't forget, you still need to do your project cover sheets. I love them too. If you have any questions, you can email me. I'll be online at our regularly scheduled time. That's it. So good luck.